Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about not any truth to this rumor necessarily, but it is a Twitter rumor, something that's been going around. Chris Bassitt potentially being traded to the Padres. And so I don't know who it was. Ryan, who was the person on Twitter that tweeted this out and kind of stirred up this rumor?
Yeah, so first off, I want to clarify that this didn't come from any of my own sources. I asked around. They have not heard this, so they can't verify. So we're asking you to take all this information with a huge grain of salt. It's just a Twitter rumor, but right now the Padres are doing absolutely nothing. So we might as well talk about this because we got to talk about something. This comes from MLB Executive Burner. This is an account on Twitter. He's got a pretty decent following, around 10,000 followers. The big thing I remember that he was right on was a few off seasons ago, he had Cole Calhoun to the Diamondbacks. And that's not really something where you can just make a complete guess. And George Springer to the Blue Jays, for example, it's not like, he just tweeted that out and accidentally got right. Like, no one saw Cole Calhoun to the Diamondbacks coming. So, clearly he has his own sort of sources, regardless of if he's actually an MLB executive. So that's where this comes from.
Yeah, so just because this kind of came out and this was talked about, we just want to talk about him potentially being traded to the Padres. Isaac, you said you like the move a lot. This is a guy that over his career, he's put up pretty good numbers. But Isaac, do you want to talk about him and just potentially the fit in San Diego?
Yeah, so I was telling Ryan before we started recording, I was saying that, he had really good numbers last year. He has really good career numbers, and there's potential to be even better. Obviously, Ruben Niebla is the one of the bigger hires the Padres have had this offseason, and we've talked a lot about how his impact could how big of an impact he could have on this Padres organization in terms of developing pitching, in terms of Mackenzie Gore and Ryan Weathers, and helping already developed pitchers just get better. So I think that would be kind of the case with Chris Bassitt. I have his numbers right here, looking at my phone. 3.15 ERA with a 106 WHIP, 159 strikeouts, and 157 innings pitched. The pitch mix it's a sinker. So it's a 6-pitch mix. It's very impressive. Sinker, 4-seam, cutter, changeup, slider, curveball. With the curveball being only thrown 6.5% of the time, the slider 10.1% of the time. But nonetheless, a very impressive arsenal. I think, with that kind of pitch mix, I mean, it throws the hitter off, obviously. It's one of the most important things a pitcher could have. We saw, Chris Paddock definitely had a hard time only having a 2-pitch mix, maybe a 3 at some points. But it'd be huge to get somebody like Chris Bassitt. This year had a 3.15 ERA. Could plug him in at the 2 or 3, or he could start out the season as a 5. We don't know, but being able to have the luxury of putting him at 2, 3, potentially 5, it's huge for this team. I don't know what it would take. He's estimated to make around $8.8 million, I think is what Ryan told me, and I think for that price, for a guy that can just through a 3.15 ERA with the 3.5 ERA in his career is that's very impressive. That could help out this organization a lot, with not only with the price, but with the need for pitching.
Yeah, this is really a great fit. In terms of cost, him making only 8.8 million, but the prospect cost, I don't think it's going to take someone in the top 100. You could probably see someone like Ryan Weathers. I know most people don't really want to move him, but he would potentially be on the table here. Joshua Mears, Justin Lang, that kind of level where it's not our top guys, maybe the upper echelon right below them is probably where you'd see people get traded from. And as Isaac brought up, his pitch mix is just phenomenal. That fastball especially, he can throw it straight, he can cut it, he can sink it, he can move it wherever he wants to. You get different velocities anywhere from, I think, 89 to 96. The velocity discrepancy is really the big for me with watching Bassitt. He throws that fastball at different speeds, different movements, mid-80s slider, mid-80s changeup, and he's got this huge lower 70s curveball. Every time he throws it, you watch someone swing and miss at it. They don't know what's coming. So he's really good at keeping people off balance, familiar with Bob Nelvin. He could potentially get even better with working with Ruben Niebla. I think it would be a perfect pickup for the Padres.
So you talked about how his his pitches have a lot of like different velocity. It ranges. His fastball though, and it does get faster. It goes like I think it topped out at what 96 was it? I think that's what I saw. But its average fastball only is 93. And it is just interesting. Like, I don't think it's like a bad pickup. I think it'd be a great pickup. But it is interesting that we've been talking so much about potentially getting a guy that throws upper 90s. And then it's like another guy that just doesn't throw that, doesn't fit that description. Like, everyone keeps thinking the Padres are going to go after a guy like that. And we've talked about that a lot. That we'd like to see that like in the back end of the bullpen. But it is interesting that it's another guy that doesn't throw super hard. But Isaac, do you think that's like a problem, or what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think pitchers are supposed to pitch, not throw as hard as they can to the strike zone and hope something good happens. Pitching is. You hear a lot of people say pitching is an art. A lot of people when they refer to guys who throw for high velocity but can't really control it or get rocked, they say they're going up there to throw. Somebody like Chris Bassitt, he goes up there to like what people say to pitch. So I think that's kind of like the difference between guys that can throw it. Like you see Joe Kelly, pretty solid reliever, gets rocked at times. I forgot. I feel like there's a couple high velocity relievers that get rocked, but Chris Bassitt with the 6-pitch mix. I mean, the objective is to go up there and get outs. You don't have to, strike everybody out. I feel like that's what a lot of people want out of high velocity pitchers. But to go up there, to have that kind of mix, get a lot of ground balls to your infield that's supposed to be pretty damn good aside from Eric Hosmer. I think that's kind of the objective with Chris Bassitt. He's not going up there to strike a bunch of people out. He's going up there to try and get the outs, get the routine ground balls, routine pop flies, and those are the kind of pitchers I really like. We look at Zach Davies a couple years ago. He didn't throw very hard. He topped out like 90. Greg Maddux is another guy that you can look at. Didn't top out at a very, very high velocity. Just guys that are going up there and using their pitch mix to their advantage. And I think that's what Chris Bassitt is.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add on there with Chris Bassitt, that fastball mix that he has, he reminds me a lot of Lance Lynn. That's someone in terms of his fastballs that I want to compare him to. Lance Lynn doesn't necessarily throw the hardest either. I think he tops out maybe 96, 97. That's exactly where Chris Bassitt tops out at. But the reason he's so effective is he mixes his four seam, his sinker, and his cutter. I think Lance Lynn throws 90% fastballs. He doesn't really throw his curveball or changeup very much. It's just the movement on those three fastballs. And you see that a lot in Chris Bassitt, because he dots that 94, 96 mile per hour four seam at the top of the zone. He cuts it in on guys, he cuts it away from guys. Same thing with the sinker, he sinks it in on guys, in away on guys. So not only is this a guy that has three really good off-speed pitches, but when you're hunting for his fastball, you don't even know where the fastball is going to go. It could cut, it could sink, it could go straight. He's just an expert at keeping guys off balance, even in his delivery. Like, he's got some weird motions in it, and guys just can't seem to time him. So that's another thing. He's not a velocity dependent type of guy. He has so many different ways where he can get people to swing and miss, make weak contact. So there's a lot to work with there.
Yeah, I do like the fit. I think it's a guy that could potentially, play. I don't know. He's started a lot of games, but maybe he could be a guy come playoff time that comes out of the bullpen in some really important spots. Now, got to get to the playoffs first, but having him on the back end of the rotation, I think would be really good. Any ideas or thoughts on like what it would cost to give up for him? Either Isaac or Ryan?
I mean, seeing how he's not the most expensive pitcher, only going to make $8.8 million. You saw Alcantara's contract was 5 years, $55 million, huge discount for the Marlins. This guy's even cheaper. So a sub 3.5 ERA. I don't know. I don't know what it would cost. I mean, I don't think it would cost Ryan Weathers. It might, but even if it costs Ryan Weathers, are you guys okay with that? I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with Ryan Weathers. The other two guys I mentioned, Justin Lang, he's the guy we drafted. I think last draft, maybe a draft before that. He throws 100, got a nice slider. He's still really young. Joshua Mears too, big outfielder, loads of power. He's setting like exit velocity records in the minor leagues, but his contact's kind of suspect. I think it's in that kind of range is where you're going to get the headliner. Maybe it would even be Weathers and Mears, something like that. But I think you're in terms of prospect cost and a headliner, you're looking at that range right behind Mackenzie Gore, where it's like Weathers, Lang, Mears, maybe even James Wood, and then maybe a couple lower level prospects. Efrain Contreras, Eggy Rosario, Brandon Valenzuela are three guys who are kind of caught up in the whole Rule 5 draft thing. Valenzuela's unprotected right now, and Contreras and Rosario just got added to the 40-man. They're going to need to make room on that 40-man to make moves like that. So potentially you could see those two guys being involved in this trade.
Yeah, so that's a lot in my opinion, just because he's going to be a free agent after this year. If he had a couple years of control, then I definitely see it just because he's a very established pitcher. But him being a free agent after this year, I don't know. It's just a lot to give up on a guy that you could potentially only have a part of your team for a very short time. So that would be my issue with it. As a player, though, I do like him a lot. So I like the fit. I just don't know if it's going to work in terms of what it would cost. Because like if you're giving up Ryan Weathers, I know that everyone's pretty low on Ryan Weathers right now, but I still feel like that's a lot considering that we've seen him succeed. Now, the baseball savant numbers will not tell you that, but I do think there's something to work with. And I do think him coming out of the bullpen as a 2-inning guy has a ton of value. I think we've seen a lot of guys become very successful in that role, and I think that's potentially what he can do. And having him along with other guys like James Wood, that'd be a clear no from me. I think that has like all the tools to be a star player. Does that mean he's going to become a star player? No, of course not. But that means like he has that potential. And when you have those guys with that flash those elite tools, the guys that have come up in the Padres system that have flashed those tools from hitters, not from the pitchers, unfortunately, but from the hitters, it seems like they've just kept doing well. Now, there hasn't been a ton of like sample size just because like we're just kind of seeing Priller's guys start to graduate, but I think we're pretty confident right now in Hassel and Abrams. I'm pretty confident in Campusano. I know he struggled at the major league level, but he was coming up like way too early. Like it didn't like it was just because they needed someone. So there's like 3 bats right there that I'm very confident they're going to do well along with some of these guys. So I think if you gave up like a James Wood, I think he's another candidate to become a top level prospect like that. So I probably would say no to that. But with that said, anything else you guys want to add or comment on? All right, sweet. Well, thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you guys very soon.